discover the Phantom is real.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Cam. Welcome back to the 1996 Project. This is a solo edition of Project because it's one of, well, it's definitely a big movie in the project. I feel like as the summer begins, not just in the project but in real life, we're getting more and more of these big movies. And well, let's just talk about The Phantom. This was directed by Simon Wincer, who had previously directed Free Willy, yes, and it starred Billy Zane and Treat Williams. And here to talk with me about it is someone who I think might be the biggest fan of this movie that I know, Austin Pez Howell. Pez, welcome. Thank you.
It seems like you bring me on and you're like, I think I know the biggest Tremors fan I know, the biggest Mummy fan I know, the biggest Predator 2 fan I know, whatever the case may be. No, I mean, I love the movies that I love, and it is what it is, and I make no bones
I'm not
about it.
exactly. I'm not trying to lie here. I'm just saying that
Oh,
you
yeah, no,
legit
I
might
understood.
be the biggest
Maybe,
fan of this,
maybe,
other than
maybe.
my dad.
I'm probably not like the biggest fan on the planet or anything like that, but I have been a fan of this movie ever since I was a kid, and I saw this movie at 10 years old in the theater, and was one of the few people who did. This movie did not do terribly well at the box office at the time, but I just always had a connection with it. And I'll try to kind of hash out what it was that kind of drew me to it as we go along, but it's a movie that's been in my life for a very long time and that I've always come back to. So no, thank you for having me on to talk about it, man. I'm excited.
Well, this movie was based on the legendary serial novels, which would turn into a comic that was created by Lee Falk, and it starred, like I said, Billy Zane, who plays, in the real world, he's known as Kit Walker, but in the forests of Bengala, he is the Phantom. He is the defender of he's the defender of the Bengala forests and the tribes that live there. However, a billionaire with designs on power named, and I love this name, Xander Drax,
Begins
played
and
by
ends with the letter X, Jacob. Yeah, that's very important. Okay.
because the 90s, I guess.
Yes.
Played by Treat Williams, is trying to find three skulls, which, when combined together, forms a supernatural force to take over the world, of course. So, Pez, you say you saw this in theaters and you were one of the only ones.
Yeah, no, and I even remember and have a distinct memory of my dad. I think dropped me off of this movie because I had seen the trailers and I thought it looked fun. Again, I was 10 at the time. I don't think he stayed with me. I think we did a lot of things in there where he would drop me off and go watch something else, go watch a dad movie, something else a little more up his alley. But he would get me set up in the theater and then I'd watch the movie. And yeah, I don't think it was a very crowded theater at the time. If I recall, I don't think this movie did terribly well at the box office. It kind of found its audience much later. I feel like this movie has had one of these slow build audiences where people have kind of found this movie over the last 30 years. And it's taken a while for it to kind of find an audience and find an appreciation in a time where, man, the 90s, Jacob, when you think about it, was the Wild West of comic book films. They were making the most random decisions on what got to the big screen in the 90s, which is a time I kind of miss for that because, of all the things you can make movies of, you had stuff like The Shadow, you had The Phantom, you had Spawn, of all things, got made in 1997. Blade was one of the Marvel movies of the 90s in 1998, and they can't get a Blade movie going now, Jacob, but they could in 1998 when comic book movies weren't even really a thing yet, pre X-Men. They did a Roger Corman Fantastic Four movie, just the most random stuff. Back in the 90s, where I kind of miss how bizarre it was. And you had stuff like The Phantom, which kind of came out of nowhere. And yeah, it's based on this kind of serial comic. And then the movie itself has the structure of those old movie serials from the 40s, which if you don't know what those were, there was stuff like Flash Gordon, Buckaroo Banzai, a lot of these things that they used to play during these matinees in the afternoon were the reason, and I'm sorry, I'm going off on a tangent of movie history, but it's important to kind of
No, please.
So, but it's fascinating to think about that. You could go back in the 40s, you could pay 15 cents and you go to the movies. And the reason why they had the thing feature presentation was that you would have stuff before the movie. So you would get a newsreel, you would get a cartoon, you maybe get a comedy short with Abbott and Costello or the Three Stooges or Laurel and Hardy or something like that. And sometimes you get a movie serial with a character. So you get a character, like a Flash Gordon or even a Batman. There were Batman serials back in the 40s where there would be this like little 15-minute adventure. And usually they would end on some kind of cliffhanger. If you've seen Toy Story 2, for anybody who's seen Toy Story 2, the Woody shorts that he watches are very much a serialized thing where it kind of it's an adventure and then it kind of ends on a cliffhanger or some kind of tease for the next episode, and then it kind of moves on to the next thing. You can almost see that structure, Jacob, in this movie when you watch it. You have the opening sequence in the jungle with the bridge, the bridge kind of sequence of that, and then the guys kind of raiding the cave. Then you have like the airplane sequence, and the boats and things like that. Then you have like the New York sequence, all the stuff around New York and the chases in there. And then you have like the island sequence at the end. It's kind of like 4 sequences sort of strung together into this narrative around, your MacGuffin of these skulls and whatnot. But it really takes inspiration from that. And Raiders of the Lost Ark did the same thing. When you watch Indiana Jones or any Indiana Jones movies, Steven Spielberg is very inspired by that. And you can see the influences on this movie when you watch it.
Yes. Yeah, and to your point, the 90s were just like you had Batman and like all of like the mainstream stuff. But then, like to your point, you had a shadow movie with Alec Baldwin and Tim Curry as the villain. You had this. You had one of my all-time favorites, The Rocketeer, which is also based on a serial novel, which, I mean, that's one of my all-time favorites. But if I ever do 93, I'll talk about that when I get there. But long story short, this was just a strange time for like that, and for horror and for other like niche subgenres. We could talk about that all night, but I remember I watched this for the first time years ago, and I thought it was fun enough. I thought it was okay. But as usual, when I go back to watch like 90s stuff, or I maybe just memory hold it, and I'm like, okay, this was just kind of there. Rewatching it back now, I liked it more this time than I did. And I think it's a couple of intangibles. Number one, I like the world. Like I love I love the Bengala forest. I love the opening sequence where it's the opening of In Case You Missed It, and it catches you up on the lore pretty much of how this young boy becomes the Phantom. I like
his sort of Batman origin story, if you will, like very briefly, in kind of a quick montage. He gets picked up by pirates. He gets gifted this ring, this legacy of, you're going to be this defender, and you're going to start a legacy and a chain of heroes, essentially, that's going to help us out.
Pretty much Tarzan, but with guns, if you really think about it, and more magic. But but then you see Kit Walker like grow up to Billy Zane, and then you see him encounter these hunters who were hired by Xander Drax, and he's like, "Who are these people?" Like I've seen them, but they have the spider web symbol, which is the enemy of the Bengala tribe. So it's like you have your connection there. And I love the sequence where the 4 like hunters are going across that rickety bridge. And I look at that and I just go, someone had to build that bridge, and that truck had to go across that bridge.
They
pay me enough to go.
It's hard to find info about how they did it, but it's clearly inspired by a movie called Sorcerer. I don't know if you've ever seen it, Jacob.
I watched that earlier this year for the first time. It's great, but I was like, that's a sorcerer's shot, right?
No, it's a sorcerer's shot. Yeah, and Sorcerer, for anybody who doesn't know, it doesn't. I know it sounds like some wizard movie, but it's a William Friedkin movie from 1977 with Roy Scheider, and it has a very famous sequence where they're trying to drive a same type of truck, like it's a very similar type of truck, clearly not to that, and they have to get across this raging river, during the storm, and this like this bamboo, vine bridge, that sways back and forth and whatnot. Yeah, it's a very similar sequence where yeah, they clearly had to like build this thing, and nobody's obviously driving it; they're just kind of towing it across and whatnot. And there's some special effect shots here and there, but it's a similar situation. Yeah, this bridge that's like very to inch your way across, things like that. But yeah, it gets the movie off to a bang. And again, it's a classic adventure sequence of like, yeah, it's just treasure hunting, and yeah, it's very kind of a mishmash of Indiana Jones meets like comic books. Even the James Remar and the henchmen are kind of dressed like Indiana Jones. They got their fedoras, they've got the vests on, they've got the guns and whatnot, and the time period is very similar as well. I think it's set in the 30s, set in like 1932. So the time period is kind of similar to sort of the Indiana Jones type era. And yeah, I think it's a nice blend, with a little supernatural stuff thrown in, and it's fun that way.
I'll push up my non-existent glasses, be like, actually, that's a Treasure of the Sierra Madre reference.
Sure.
But,
it's the same thing, because Spielberg saw Treasure of the Sierra Madre when he was a kid, and then him and Lucas wrote Raiders. So that's it's a direct reference to that. Yeah.
But I love that. I love that sequence. I love when they get to New York, and like I love the Art Deco stuff. I love like Xander Drax is this like billionaire, but is like as much of a tech billionaire as you can be in the 30s.
Yeah.
Like he's evil, but he's so full of himself that it's kind of great. I love the scene where he's like, get this doctor come in and be like, hey, would you come take a look at this? Like in this microscope here. It's like
the liar. Yeah.
I can just focus, it'll be there. He's like, and knives stick out from the thing. He's like, and it's like, well, I won't be needing these anymore. Snap. Like, that is so petty. Why would
Treat Williams? Treat Williams, not to make a pun on his name, is a treat in this movie. He's so fun to watch. And here's the great thing about it is I think Treat Williams saw this character and he saw the script and he knew the time period and whatnot. He knows exactly what kind of movie he's in. Exactly. And he's playing up to that. He's playing up to this kind of, it's not so much like a mustache twirling villain, because he's not like completely eating scenery and overacting, but he's like, you can tell he's enjoying his evil. He's enjoying like his plans for world domination. He's having fun while he's doing it. He's like, we're going to the Devil's Vortex, can you believe it? That sort of thing. Just he's so joyous in the way he's just like, good man, like, get on my team and let's go take over. I can take over, come on, what do you say, the skulls for the girls? Like he's just got this pep in his step that's so much fun. He steals every scene he's in. This was what made me a Treat Williams fan, was this movie. And then like I kind of followed him afterwards in different projects. But same with Billy Zane. I think he also knows what movie he's in. He's very charming and charismatic in this movie. He's really good. And he was so close. Like he was on that precipice of being like an A-list star, because you get this, and then he literally is in the biggest movie of all time the year after that. He's in Titanic, so he's like right on the edge of like being, like a big A-list star, and for whatever reason, it just kind of doesn't happen, unfortunately for him.
Yeah.
I've met him, by the way. He's a super nice guy. I could tell a story about meeting him real quick. I got a chance to meet him at a Fanboy Expo in Knoxville. Got him to sign some stuff. I was wearing my other Phantom shirt at the time that I had. Got a picture with him. And you know what the cool thing is, Jacob? He loves the Phantom. He's not ashamed of it at all. He loves this movie. He loved playing the character, and he loves going to these. He does a lot of conventions now, and I think what he likes about it, and I talked to him a little bit about this, is that if Billy goes on like, Good Morning Seattle, right? Like some random thing, and he's promoting something, right? All they want to talk about is Titanic, right? Like all the mainstream people, they just want to talk to him about Titanic. He goes to the comic book conventions or the horror conventions. He gets to talk about the Phantom. He gets to talk about Dead Calm. He gets to talk about Demon Knight, the Tales from the Crypt movie that he's great in. He gets to talk about all these like other genre movies that he did, and like talk about the stuff that he really had fun with. And he loves the Phantom. He's totally down to do a sequel if they ever do it. And it almost happened in 2008. I can talk about that later. It almost happened and just never quite did. This movie's ripe for a sequel if they ever did it, with the lore built in. But yeah, I mean, he loves this movie. You can tell the people that made it with a love and care. In like you said, the set design and the time period and the music from David Horner is really good. Like there's just everything feels like it's made with that old school entertainment aspect built into it. Like it's just simple adventure, which I appreciate.
as you mentioned, like you brought up Demon Knight, that's my favorite Billy Zane. I love
He's
him
so
as the
good in that movie.
director.
He's great. He's so charismatic in that movie. He's amazing in that movie. He's
That
fantastic.
whole movie is just like it that whole movie probably would have just been completely put off to the side if not for the Tales from the Crypt branding.
Yes.
But at
Yeah.
the same time, I feel like it still doesn't get talked about enough because everyone loves Tales from the Crypt, but I feel like no one really talks about that particular movie. Like him, William Sadler, like Jada Pinkett Smith is in there randomly. The great and powerful Dick Miller is a side character in there.
Of course.
Just that movie's
Thomas Hayden
great.
Church is in that movie. Yeah, that
Yeah,
movie's like ripe with character actors, as is this movie. This movie's ripe with
yes.
character actors. I mean, I just mentioned,
Mhm.
you have James Remar in there. You have Patrick McGowan playing his dad. The late great Baotu Kerry Tagawa, who we just lost recently, shows up later as Kabai Sang, the pirate kind of in the third act. Casey Zamasco from Back to the Future. David Proval, who's like kind of a mob actor who always plays kind of mob henchman. Like, again, if you know your character actors, this movie's also like ripe with them throughout. And we have to mention the two ladies who we haven't talked about. You got Catherine Zeta-Jones in one of her first big roles she ever did, and this is pre like Entrapment, pre Thomas Crown, like all the kind of stuff she would do, kind of in the late '90s. And Christy Swanson, who was really blowing up in the '90s, coming off of Buffy and the movie and a whole bunch of other stuff. But what I like about their characters is that they're badass females, like, which was kind of rare at the time. They're not damsels in distresses. Like Christy Swanson, she gets kidnapped, so to speak, but she's not like a whining, crying, screaming for the hero type of person. She's talking back to everybody. She fights back when she gets a chance to. Same with Catherine Zeta-Jones. Starts out as this kind of villain, but kind of turns when she realizes kind of what's going on. But I like that, again, kind of progressive for a 1996 movie. That we didn't get a lot of.
I was completely surprised when I saw Catherine Zeta-Jones in this. Like I because I rewatching it back, I'm like, wait, she was active in '96. I could have sworn like she was only big, like she didn't get big until like Mask of Zorro or something. But
That's
clearly
what I
I was
mean. Yeah,
wrong.
not till like the late '90s is when she kind of blew up. Yeah, but she was here. Yeah, this is one of her earliest roles.
Yeah, but she was great, and just the action is a lot of fun. Like there's just like it's pretty simple and to the point. There's nothing too super elaborate, I would argue, till the end, but
Mhm.
it's a lot of gunplay, a lot of like stunt stuff, and this is the '90s, so there's not a ton of CGI that you could do. So they had to do stunts, and the stunts I thought were great.
Yeah, no, there's long shots of like that airplane sequence where there are people hanging off the side of an airplane. There's close-up composite shots where it's clearly our main stars. Kind of in front of a composite screen, but they do these pullback shots where there are real stunt people kind of hanging off of planes and whatnot. Yeah, there's big, car sequences and motorcycle sequences where there's real stunt people riding horses. The real location stuff. They really went to Thailand, filmed a bunch of stuff, so all the beaches and the water that you see and all the mountains and the jungles, is all from Thailand. So there's some real stuff there. They went to New York and shot some things around New York City. Now, not the one sequence where you see the cars just going in front of the newspaper building because it's clearly like a set because they're coming around the corner in front of like a
Sure.
matte painting.
Right.
There's that, but again, gives it kind of a charm of like a 1930s kind of movie, which I'm fine with.
Mhm.
But yeah, like the final, the Sang Brotherhood, like the pirate cave, if you will, like it's all practical sets. People doing flying all over the place. Again, that kind of old school sort of Captain Blood, Errol Flynn adventure kind of things. People
Yeah.
flying around on ropes and whatnot. You got sharks in that sequence, which is just an added cherry on top. They just happen to have sharks roaming around, like a little boat, that eat people. People getting hit with cannons. Like it's all like silly and over the top, but I think in that tongue-in-cheek way where again they know what movie they're making. They're making these
Yeah.
throwbacks to these 30s and 40s adventure films, and just making it in that serial style, and I think it works.
It kinda hit me though at a certain point where I was like, "Yeah, I love this movie quite a bit, but I get why maybe it wasn't as successful." Because keep in mind that, like, you could argue that comic book movies were kinda just being not taken super seriously even by this point, because
Right.
we get Spawn the next year, which I personally do not enjoy, but I'm gonna save that for when I cross the 97 bridge.
Right.
But then
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
get Blade and like Batman and Robin, so you're getting more towards a real fatigue coming on. But then just in general in the movie release calendar, around this same time this movie gets released, a little movie called The Rock gets released. And that
Mhm.
movie just lays waste to everything else. It's the highest grossing movie of the year. So
Right.
I'm not saying that The Rock had anything to do with the Phantom not working. What I will say, though, is that it's an unfortunate position for the Phantom to be released. It's like I love Treasure Planet, but that got released the same weekend as a Harry Potter film. Like that's not going to work. It and
Yeah,
it and
I think what it was is they thought that this was going to be like a big summer blockbuster. It was released in June of that year. Like we're smack in the middle of all the summer stuff. And I think a kind of smaller movie like this, even though it had a about a $50 million budget, which was pretty decent at the time, I think they just kind of overestimated the fact that it's not a super well-known property, so you're taking a gamble on that, even with marketing. And I think, man, if you had released this movie in even like in October, or a March or something like that, maybe before or after, a summer season, where it's not loaded up with your big tentpole films and your big action and your Schwarzenegger movies or whatever, it's going up against things like that. I think it does a little bit better than what it did, because it only ended up making about 20 some odd $1 million, which is again unfortunate. I know it did well on video though. I think it actually was a decent rental, and it did. I saw it on cable a lot, so I think the cable rights got played quite a bit.
Well, if Waterworld is any proof, then that can definitely save your bacon. But at the
Yeah.
time, I'm pretty sure that wasn't the news that the studio wanted. So probably hence why we didn't get a Phantom 2, unfortunately. And The Rock is
Now I want to say we almost did in 2008, around 2008. We almost did. There was in development a movie called Phantom Legacy, which makes and the title makes sense because given the mythology of the character as we see in the movie, it passes from a father to son type of situation, right? So this movie's ripe for a sequel. If you ever did it, you cast Billy Zane as the older Phantom, who is either retiring or dies in battle and passes it on to the son, and it's like it's ripe for that. It almost got made with Sam Worthington of all people as his son, right before like pre-Avatar, kind of Sam Worthington when he started becoming, one of the it guys. Catherine Zeta-Jones was like down to return. They were going to actually get a few people back, and it just kind of fell through, for reasons. They were going to reboot it in 2014. That never really happened either. So, I don't know. They made a TV kind of thing on sci-fi that's not very good. And they made an animated thing that's not great either. I don't know where the Phantom goes from here. If it would ever be revived. It's again, it's found an audience. It finally came to Blu-ray. It's on 4K now. Unfortunately, not really a lot of like special features and stuff. We still haven't really gotten a great release of this. I wish Arrow or Vestron or somebody, one of these boutique labels would kind of pick it up and maybe like, dig in and do some interviews and some commentaries and, really kind of dig into the fandom of this movie, and give us a good release with some special features. That's the one thing we've kind of lacked over the years is finding information about the movie. But the Phantom Legacy, I think it's interesting that it's taken a long time, but it has found an audience of people who see this movie. And I think we've sometimes, Jacob, been fatigued with all these comic book movies that they seem to only exist to set up the next movie or to set up the larger universe or to cram in something, to tease whatever. And it's just this movie that kind of exists as one adventure. And sure, there's a sequel pitch with the mythology that's built in with the father-son thing. If you did one, you could do one. There's things laid out that you could do, in a legacy sequel. But it's not like this movie's trying to cram in 50 different things. It's like, here's our hero, here's our villain, here's our side characters. Let's have an adventure. And I think simplicity is something we've lost in movies now. It's just everything kind of exists to set up the next thing, the next piece of content. And you go back and watch a movie like this, and it's just a really fun, self-contained adventure.
Yeah, there's a lot to enjoy about this. severely underrated as the Phantom. I'm giving this a great rating, a hidden gem from this year. And make no mistake, I'm sorry that I was sleeping on this one for so long,
Yes.
but my eyes are open now. But I
Yeah.
pass it off to all of you. What did you think of the Phantom? If you have seen it, let us know in the comments. Love to read what you have to say. And Pez, thank you so much for joining me once again. Appearance number 3 in this project alone, but I always
Hey.
love having you on because
Yeah.
I always just love talking to you about stuff like this. So I
Yeah,
can't
totally.
thank you enough.
Hey, no, man. Thanks for having me as always. I love talking about, kind of my favorite movies and spreading the word on stuff like The Phantom, like I've been doing for years, and carrying the torch for movies like this and Predator 2 and, some of these kind of offbeat movies that I feel people should give a second chance to. I enjoy doing that. Even Tremors to a degree, which I know has a fandom now, but, I always carry the torch for it for a long time. So, no, thanks for having me. And you can find me over on the Movie Hero Network. So come find me, and you'll see me geek out over all kinds of stuff over there. But thanks for having me as always, Jacob. Always a pleasure to chat with you, man.
Yeah, Movie Hero Network, they're always doing something over there, so go check
Mhm.
them out. Check out Lonely Marks as well. And then as far as the 96 project goes, I am pressing on with yet another solo episode. I promise it's not going to be all solo episodes, but for this next movie I'm going to be talking about, it's only the highest grossing movie of the year, so I kind of have to dedicate it just to that. It's only a little movie called The Rock, and no, I'm not talking about the wrestler and the actor. I'm talking about the one Michael Bay movie that everyone seems to like.
Yes.
But for Pez, my name is Ryan Kim. See you all in the next one.